All right, we're working on the live stream now. All right, here we go. And we are live. Thank you everyone so much for your patience. You know, in this wonderful age of technology, it's great when it works. And then when it doesn't, it's a little bit hazy and panicky. Oh my gosh, how do we fix this? So I think we've found a solution rather. So with that, let me say good afternoon. My name is Sarah Gottwallace, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Dr. Talbot Spivak Holocaust Memorial Committee. It is my esteemed honor and privilege today to bring to you Mr. Sal Uman. Did I say that right? Ewan? Ewan. There we go. And he's going to be sharing his experience today with us growing up as a child of Holocaust survivors. So Saul is going to be sharing his experience with us. And it's a very unique experience that perhaps some of us haven't heard before. I know that in all my years being a Holocaust historian, really prior to this week, I hadn't really sat down and talked to any descendants or future generations of Holocaust survivors. So not only is Saul going to be sharing his family history, but a little bit of perhaps his personal views and how being a child of Holocaust survivors impacted him as well. So stories like this are always vastly important, very, very important. I cannot emphasize this enough because we are seeing a rise in anti-Semitism as well as a rise in Holocaust denial in our community at home, at large, and globally. So please, by all means, if you have any questions, place those in the chat on YouTube there. Make sure that you are signed into YouTube so that you can actually put those questions into the chat. If you think of any questions afterward, you can email us. My email is sarah.gottwallace@fsw.edu, and I will be happy to pass those along to Saul if we should run out of time or anything. Otherwise, please remember what Saul says today. Share them with other people so that we can be the beacons of truth and hope and light going into the future, and that we can always remember the importance of Holocaust education and Holocaust memory. So without further ado, pass it over to you, Saul.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present my story. And if there's anything that I should be mentioning or not mentioning, please let me know. My mom and dad were Holocaust survivors. My mother came from the town of Skarżysko-Kamienna, which is about 60 miles from Warsaw. And she came from a family of about 9 children. And the only ones that survived was an older brother and a sister who spent her war years in Paris, France. And in 1943, on the second day of Sukkot, she had been assigned to a work detail at a munitions factory. I think it was called the Hasag factory, where they made munitions. And on the way there was told that she could not come back home anymore, and said goodbye to her mother. And in that conversation, she asked, "Mom, should I cut off my 2 fingers so I can go with you?" And her mother said, "No, here is a comb, take care of yourself, hold your head up high, and do what's right." And that is the last time that she ever saw her mother again. And she worked 12-hour shifts there at that factory. She had been transferred out of that and went to a town called Częstochow, where she worked on, I think it was airplane gliders. She was there with a cousin and a niece, and wound up going through Bergen-Belsen near the end of the war, got typhus, and was on the verge of giving up on a death march to Allah, which is not far from Munich. And it was there in Allah where she really thought that she was going to be overcome. But at the last second, the liberation came. And instead of being shot, she was liberated by an American soldier, and her life began again. My dad came from the town of Oswiecim, which later became Auschwitz. His family had spent, I suppose, generations there in Auschwitz. And they met and they married in 1945, November the 29th of 1945. In 1947, I was born as a twin. Unfortunately, my twin never made it. Unfortunately, my dad got sick in 1949 and passed away at the age of 31. I don't know very much about my dad, as much as I tried to find out. I know that he had been in 3 or 4 different camps and was liberated from Dachau. And it was ironic that my other twin never made it, because after spending 5 years there in Munich, in Feldafing at a DP camp, we had registered to go to America. And I just cannot imagine what my mother would have done had she had twins to try and take care of 2 kids coming to America. So it was ironic and unfortunate, I guess, that my other twin never made it. But I think for my mother's sake of sanity, things worked out. There's a little wrinkle to the story because when we came to St. Louis, we left Germany, Bremenhaven, in January of 1951. And on January the 20th of 1951, we landed in New Orleans, Louisiana. It was there that we had got onto a train, made it into St. Louis, Missouri. And wherever we are on January the 20th, my mom and I always raise a toast to thank God and for his goodness in letting us come to America. In St. Louis, she met another survivor, and his name was Joseph Kupfermans. And he also was a survivor who lost his wife and child in Auschwitz. And he also was liberated near Dachau and wound up coming in. And he came from the city of Lodz, Poland, and spent the war years in the Lodz ghetto, and wound up being transferred from Auschwitz and wound up in Munich. The one interesting fact about my stepfather is that near the end of the liberation, the end of World War II, he was put on a train with about 2,500 other people. And near the end of the war, they gave out the Red Cross packets, and he hung his Red Cross packet on an emergency brake on the train. And for 2 days, the train could not move, and they could not figure out what was wrong with the train. And finally, after the second day, someone pointed and saw where the Red Cross packet was, and the train was able to move. And it wound up in Garmisch-Partenkirchen, up in the mountains. Had it not been for that Red Cross packet, and had it not been for him hanging that on the emergency brake, all those people would have been shot and killed because they were just shooting people at the end of the war, and it was too late for them to do that to the people on that train. So he saved those 2,500 people that were on the train with him. He also came to St. Louis, Missouri. My mom and dad married on July the 7th. And exactly on my birthday, 5 years after I was born, my brother was born, Abe. And he's named after the little boy that his dad lost at Auschwitz. A couple of pictures, if you like, I could show you. Here's a picture of my mom and dad. And this is in Feldafing. And they had lived in a room there at a villa, and it was called Villa Valberta. Those that know about Feldafing and the displaced person camp might be familiar with that. Here's another picture of my parents. And Here is a picture of when my dad died. And that's me right there, standing there. Oh, there. Yeah, that's me. And that kind of is a little bit of a synopsis of my history. In terms of growing up in a Holocaust environment, there were a lot of tense moments many times, because the marriage that was with my mom and stepfather was not the same kind of a marriage that was with my mom and my dad. It was kind of based on love. Not that my stepfather and mother didn't love each other. It was more of a marriage of convenience. And there was a lot of tension. My dad, or my stepfather, was an upholsterer, and he was a craftsman. My mother, on the other hand, was more of a production-minded person. And they started the home decorating business together. And there was a lot of tension in terms of how to get things done. In terms of, here I was, a precocious 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And I did, I'm sure, create a lot of situations where it tested everybody's patience. I did wind up having a lot of trouble, like with ulcers, because of the tension. But thank God things worked out okay. And I wound up marrying a wonderful woman by the name of Sue. And she gave me 2 wonderful little boys, one of which is named after my father. His name is Barrick. And my other son, his name is Joshua, named after Sue's grandfather. Aside from that, it's hard to understand and imagine the enormity of the crime that was committed, and for no other reason than being Jewish. And for that reason, I try to go to shul as often as I can, only for the simple reason that I can, because a generation ago, they couldn't. So that's my story. And if there's any questions, please let me know. I'm thankful that you've given me the opportunity to express myself. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing with us as well, Saul. Amazing story with the train. I was right on the edge of my seat, like, oh, what's going to happen next? What happens here? Was there anything that you noticed with your mother, as far as that maybe she had idiosyncrasies, like maybe food that she didn't like to cook or that sort of thing? Any little household rules that you would associate, I should say, with Holocaust experience?
Well, one thing I was lucky with is that we spoke Yiddish at home. In terms of food and idiosyncrasies, food was paramount. First off, you didn't waste food. Anytime you came home, the first thing that my mom asked me, are you hungry? Are you hungry? And food played a real pivotal role. And then just being aware of your surroundings. They didn't raise me to be a hateful person, whereas they could have. Go your own way, do the right thing. If you can, lend a helping hand, but don't be a jerk. And I think that I tried to pass on to my kids. I think I succeeded, and I think they succeeded in terms of not using violence as a means to get the point across.
It's wonderful. What did you do for a living?
I got a degree in journalism and never used it. My parents were in the decorating and the drapery business. I came up to Minneapolis, Minnesota in 1972 and started my own company. And I was in business for 40 plus years, turned the business over to my boys, and they now hopefully are successful at what they're doing. So the one thing about being in that business is that you always never the same day twice, and that you're always visiting and being in different situations, talking to different people on any walk of life, from going from homeless shelters to even the governor's mansion in the same day. And it was fascinating to always be talking with people. And I'm glad to say, with a name like Sal, living in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that I don't think ever, maybe once, ever experienced any anti-Semitism against me personally. So I think that's a tremendous tribute to America.
That's excellent.
It is.
I love hearing the stories from second generation and descendants all the way down, grandchildren, because what that really says, as we were discussing in a previous session here, what that really proves is that Hitler and his cronies, the other Nazis, were failures in trying to accomplish their one goal, which was to exterminate and extinguish and eliminate the Jewish community.
Yep.
I think that's just wonderful. I had a Jewish friend who had 7 children, and she was a survivor. And she said, it was a lot to raise my brood, but I had to get back at him. That was my last stab at them. That really says a lot.
The one thing that I didn't mention, but Feldafing, which was where the DP camp was for 2 years, I think it was 1946 and 47, had the highest per capita birth rate in the world, because instead of resorting to violence or whatever, they said, no, we have to rebuild our lives again. And it was really an interesting statistic that a little town like that per capita had the highest birth rate in the world.
You're celebrating love and celebrating life.
Yeah.
Thank God. That's amazing. I love that. Chloe and Ashrith both are in the audience. They say thank you very much for sharing your powerful story.
Sure, thank you.
Once again, folks, if you have questions, just channel those on in and I will pass those over and through there. So I know that other survivor children have talked about having a sense of that their parents would be very hypervigilant, so to speak, and say, here's how we go, here's how we escape, here's our safe plan. And it's funny because growing up, my dad did the same thing, and we don't have the same background as Holocaust survivor children, but that was always very important to both of my parents. And it is interesting how we imprint things. Like on both sides of my family, my grandparents lived through or were children of the Great Depression. So you saw a lot of, we save things. My father still, my mother and I, just last night, we were joking with him about this. My father will save a little itty bitty piece of wood because you might be able to use that on something. Same thing with tin cans and stuff. My husband had to break me of the habit of saving, cans and jars and stuff. Well, I can use this. Like, on what? We have a garage full of cans and jars. Yeah, but not this one, not this size. I might need it. Did you experience anything like that too?
I didn't know we were related.
Right. Isn't that so funny?
And I'm guilty of the same thing. The other thing that I remember growing up is you didn't have too many friends. Friends didn't come over to your house. I don't know if it was mistrust. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was, but it just didn't work out. The other thing that was interesting too, they dressed different, but I was never ashamed of my parents. We'd go to the stores and we'd go shopping. And I remember, reading tin cans to my parents and say, okay, this is pineapple and this is this. And we would read billboards so they could learn the language. And they were so proud to become citizens. And I myself had to go for citizenship. And I remember standing with my mom and this one officer in his office with my hand up to swear to defend my country against all foes. And it was really a meaningful experience. And I love this country. And it was really a very poignant moment.
It's wonderful. You mentioned to me earlier that you have some Yiddish poems. Would you like to share one or two? Or?
Oh, yeah. Well, I suppose I could. The problem is is you have to have a pretty good you have to have a pretty good understanding of Yiddish, because it's an advanced poem in Yiddish that that I might be reading. So
Are you able to translate for us too? Like, could you
say
read,
again? Yeah,
could you read it and then translate?
sure. Sure. Here we go. Okay. Well, I had a couple of good ones about the Holocaust. That shall I bring up the ones from the Holocaust?
Sure. I know I caught you off guard. We didn't talk
A
about
little
this.
bit. Let me see what I can do here quick, and um,
Sure.
we can do that. Come on.
Richard from the audience says when you
There
read
we go.
Richard from the audience says when you read in the Yiddish, talk slow. Richard
Okay.
knows Yiddish, so he.
Okay, here we go. This is a poem about my dad. That he came from the town of Awend. Come on. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. Here I have one. I can't find that one. Here's another one that I have. It's called Ich bin a Yid. I am a Jew. Ich bin a Yid. En ich hab nicht kein Meure. Defa ich glaub in the Teure. I am a Jew, and I have no fear because I believe in the Torah. Die Werte hieten up meine Kerpe. The words guard my being. Tug und Nacht schant sich de Lacht, und was Hashem hat gemacht. Day and night, its light shines and shows what Hashem has made. De greste, de beste, the greatest and the best. De Berge and the Levuna, the mountains and the moon, mit einer rupgelotten Punem, with a downward drooping face. De Zin, im Kickedik can bewähren blind. The sun, in looking, can one be blind, become blind. Und de Wasseren azoi tief, de Barmder, as vet gave Mariv. And the waters are so deep, be aware if it should call to you. Alles, dus macht Gott. De Teure sucht azoi, sei, ot. And all of this God makes. The Torah says so. See, here. Scheinheit, Reinheit. In a nice way and in a pure, pristine way. Azoi steht geschrieben, auf ewig geblieben. That's how it is written, for always to remain. Und mit dem Glauben wird man into gehäuben. And with this belief, we become elevated. In Haaretz fin a Yid, ot anoret, ot. In the heart of a Jew, there is a place, and notice, du liegt in ze Gott. This is where our God resides. In the Neshuma, sicher liegt es. And the soul is where it lies. Mit dem letzten schwachen Kol hab ich sagen. With my last weakening voice, I will say, Shema Yisrael Shema. Ma Gloim is Take Gitra. Shema Yisrael Shema. My belief is most precious. A little longer than I thought it would be, but there it is.
It's beautiful. And I agree with Richard. Richard says it's been too long to understand 30%. So
yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was about 15%. So, if you teach Yiddish, Richard and I will take your class.
That's great. That'd be glad. I've done it before and it's a lot of fun.
Yes, it would be. Excellent. So do you have any other little side projects that you work on too?
Trying to get, after I've accumulated all these poems, I'm trying to get the poems out there. There is a podcast that I have. It's called Kashmir in Yiddish.
Okay.
That you can check out. There's 10 episodes on a variety of subjects, and some sad, some funny. And from what I've heard, it's worth tuning into. So check it out. It's called Kashmir in Yiddish.
Spell that out for us.
KISHMIRIN Yiddish, YIDDISH.
Excellent. See, just like that, you've got at least 10 more followers.
Oh,
So
great.
all you have to do is come on here and bare your soul to us, and then we'll start listening to your podcast. Does anybody have any other questions for Saul? We're just hanging out now. I think it's really very interesting, especially moving into the future when our survivors are no longer able to share their stories. It's going to be up to second generation, third generation to continue sharing the stories of their parents. So as we were talking in our last panel, it's so important to remember the stories of your parents and your grandparents and try to keep those alive moving forward and share that information. It's very, very important. Well, Saul, I don't see any other questions as of right now. I will put this out there for you guys. My email address is sarah.gottwallace. You can see my name right there in the chat box. So it's sarah.gottwallace@fsw.edu. And I'll be happy to take any questions and forward those over to Saul and direct those to him and get the answers back to you as soon as possible if you think of anything else in the future there. Saul, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story of your mother and your father and your stepfather. It's been a pleasure hearing from you.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you again in the future. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Up next at 2:30, we're going to be hearing from Steen Metz. He was a Holocaust survivor in Theresienstadt, and he's Danish. So crunching the numbers there, he's very, very unique and very, very special. Dear friend of mine, love him to death. Check out his next